Hello and welcome to today's Fat Tell Daily. Today I'm joined by our Tuesday editor, Brian Chu. Brian, welcome.
Hey Woody, how you going?
I'm good, mate. And today you've been in a bit of a reflecting mood. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, sure, Woody. Now, today isn't the 26th of January, so it's not Australia Day, but it's Australia Day for me because my family and I arrived here on the 10th of September 1989. So it's our 35th anniversary of being here. And reflecting on like how my parents brought me here because we were a bit concerned about what could happen in Hong Kong when China took over in 1997. I looked at where how the country I grew up in, which is here, and where we've been and where we could be heading. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that when we came to Australia, it was a nation with a lot of hope. I remember every week at school we sang the Australian anthem, and gradually I grew on to understand the different words that the meaning inside, especially about how we're young and free. The land is like there's a balance in nature's gifts. There's resources, it creative people who who were once convicts, who were once free settlers, and we became the two of the world's richest nations in the 20th century, along with Argentina. Now, we're still a pretty prosperous nation, but I believe that few people would now agree with the fact that the future is as bright as what it was back in the 1980s, especially now a lot of people are weighed down by a lot of debt. They are also feeling that they can't express themselves as freely as they used to. And there is a bit of parallel with the mood that I picked up in Hong Kong in the last 10 years. And it's only kind of gotten worse in both countries. Hong Kong, given that there's a national security law and also they are restricting free speech, and people also are heavily weighed down by debt because of housing. And in Australia, we're not as bad as what it's in Hong Kong, but you can feel that um, people want to express their discontent, but they're afraid to do so among their social circles. And with housing debt, and we'll come along, we'll get to this soon. The Reserve Bank of Australia governor last week, Mary Bullock, actually said, Michelle Bullock, sorry, Michelle Bullock said that some Australians might need to sell their house to cope with the upcoming recession. They're not going to cut rates, and I'm going. The last time I've ever heard a Reserve Bank of Australia governor say stuff like this, I can't remember when. They used to be like protecting housing. They'll do anything to try to keep this game going, and now they're going, well, bad luck. You're gonna have to live with it. And I was like, that's not the country I grew up in. I don't like where this is all going.
Mm. One of we'll come to the debt load because I think that's a
Hmm.
really important backdrop to the whole piece. But you highlight the declining purchasing power of the average Sydney, like you chose because I guess
Hmm.
that's where the data comes from.
Yes.
You chose you highlight the declining purchasing power of the average Sydney worker over the past few decades. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that? Because obviously your background obviously is in precious metals, hard money, and obviously subsequently gold stocks and things like that. But you are very knowledgeable of the strength
Hmm.
and the power of a strong hard currency. But we don't have that. How much of that do you think has had to play in all this, especially in terms of purchasing power of the average Aussie?
It's a good question. Quite a compound question in this one. In
Sorry.
terms of the Australian dollar, we are known as a commodity currency. So our economy is largely driven by our mineral resources. And until probably about last 10, 15 years, it used to be also manufacturing, agriculture, uh, and as well as a plethora of other things. Biotech, we've got CSL, one of the world's largest biotech companies. And education. But nowadays we're running on literally a 3-speed economy: housing, and finance, mining, and also international education. And it's a three-legged stool, which the legs are coming off our stools, and where we should be a bit concerned because of the concentration. Now, the wealth of Australians, going back to the 80s and 90s, I wrote off in my article today that the Australian family in the 80s and 90s, they had things to hope for. They were saving up. Most households could live on a single income and have enough to save up, have a holiday, and they've got a bright future to look towards. Nowadays, what we got, dual income family. Even the dual income family may struggle to make ends meet, and the income. Look, back in the 80s, the average income was about 35,000 Australian dollars. It doesn't sound like much, but today, our average income in Sydney is over $100,000. And you think, $100,000, that could buy you a lot. But most of us know that that is not the case. $30,000 in the 80s actually could afford more than nowadays. And what happened? It is because the purchasing power of the dollar continued to fall. And what's a good benchmark to measure it? Well, number one is your grocery, your standard shopping trolley. How much you can actually, how much you have to pay to buy a week's groceries. Most people may kind of have an idea of what that is, but they may reduce the quality or reduce the quantity of what they buy. Now, something more constant would be gold. Now, the price of gold back in the 1980s, late 1980s, would be about 400 Australian dollars. Nowadays, it's $3,750. And most people may not be aware of the significance of the price of gold, but they know the significance of what they're actually able to buy on a weekly basis. I could still remember a family friend of mine. Apparently, he showed us his employment contract in the late 90s when he was getting paid 77,000 Australian dollars. And I actually calculated how much it was worth today. Woody, do you want to have a guess how much $77,000 a year is worth today in equivalent terms?
Tell me.
$490,000. Now, how many people are earning $490,000 a year? And he was in middle management in a telecommunications company. So it was no surprise that he was able to afford going out dining once or twice a week. They could easily afford going on overseas holidays, even though they were a very frugal family. For us today, I can tell you, if I have $490,000 a year, I'll be living pretty comfortably. But I don't think I would be sitting on a much higher level of the curve compared to the rest of the Australians who are earning on average $100,000 a year. So it just goes to show how far we've come down and the loss of purchasing power and wealth over time.
It's quite a parallel because another thing that many people don't realize is the relationship between inflation and the effect on purchasing power and the fall of empires in history. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments on that. I don't want to be all doomy to the point where I believe we're on the precipice, but unless things change, I mean, the gap between the gap in society is going to get worse, right?
Yeah, that's true. So if you look at the history, whether it's Chinese history, Roman history, Egyptian history, and also
I think the Chinese actually invented paper money, didn't they?
I think so. So different empires found ways to adulterate currency over time. They started with gold, then gold and silver. Then, as they mounted up deficits, as in they spent more than they earned, they had to find ways to keep things going and added cheaper forms of metal or materials to replace the money that they had. Every single time that happened, you will have a greater disparity of the wealthy and the poor. And in many cases, empires fell because of that. The Chinese, well, ancient China, the amazing thing about China and ancient empires like that is one of the few empires that still remain today in some form. The nation itself is still there, whereas you got Rome. Well, Rome conquered much of Europe and also North Africa, but they're now part of Italy, but they have people with Roman blood are spread around the world. Chinese, they're still there, still that piece of land. Every single time, the dynasties that fell happened because wars, famines, poverty, revolt. Now, I really don't hope, I don't wish upon any country to have to go down this path. And I do believe, and I want to be more hopeful, that Australians become more aware and they start taking small steps to change their way of living and their way of thinking to steer themselves out of trouble rather than simply say to government, you got to fix this up. Because every time the government tries to fix something up, it creates a bigger problem because the government is one big body trying to represent anyone and everyone and end up representing no one except for those who sit in government.
Yeah, and I'm sure. Look, this isn't anyone in government. I'm sure, or well, on the most part anyway. Even if you intend well, it tends to go the opposite, doesn't it? The opposite direction. But let's talk about so let's couple more questions before we round off today's chat. So how do you see this playing out in the financial markets, and what opportunities or risks should investors be aware of as a result?
Yeah, that's something which I think is really important to keep in mind is opportunities for our viewers.
Because
Now,
sorry, Brian, I'll
go
just
for it.
interrupt. One thing that does become clear is in as purchasing power from fixed income gets affected in inflation, asset prices tend to do very well, don't they? Or certain ones do.
Yeah, that's right. Certain assets will perform well over time as inflation plays its role. Um, Gold is, of course, one of them. Um, Stocks of companies that have a good business model, good management, and is able to adapt to changing times. Just think about the days when Kodak cameras were the thing, and there was Polaroid cameras. When digital camera came, and Kodak didn't shift to film, and they continued down this path. Didn't shift to digital, but went for film. They literally went bankrupt. So businesses have to adapt in order to do better. Now, Australia, as I said before, we're heavily focused on resources, finance, international education, and agriculture. There has to be something has to give. Australia has to increase its capabilities across the board. But regardless, I see a strong future for resources because we are probably one of the world's richest nations with in-ground resources of gold, copper, silver, zinc, tin, and nowadays antimony as well. And of course coal, iron, and gas. So we've got stuff that all these other countries would want, and they want to do deals with us. Australia has to find good trading partners. We have to have a strong bargaining power. We shouldn't be fawning over countries that are willing to pay us just more money, but we have to listen to their political views or accede to their demands, which of course is a country we talked about before, where China places a lot of pressure with its trading partners, not only to do trade, but to transform society and businesses. We certainly don't want that type of thing to happen. And if Australians can become more self-sufficient, individuals think beyond the next moment. They don't just focus on looking after themselves, but they think of the generation in the future. We can influence society and the government to steer ourselves in the right direction. And I believe that's why I called the title of this article Advance Australia Fair, because in history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. in joyful strains, then let us sing Advance Australia Fair.
On that note, Brian, we'll call it a day. Thanks so much for your commentary on your piece today. If you enjoyed this chat, let us know what you think in the comments below. Of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to receive Fat Tail Daily each day, go over to our website. There'll be a sign-up page and there's a link to Brian's article directly below too. I hope you enjoy it. Let us know what you think. And Brian, thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Woody, and thanks, everyone. God bless.